So the year is 1990. Been out of racing now, essentially had quit back at the end of 93, maybe done a few races in 94. Quit to get married at that time. And starting a tree service, that was starting to go in that, so it was very occupied there, had very little time to do anything but basically run the tree service, get it going in that. So very limited time. So anyway, roll around, the year 1990 comes around. And back when I quit in 83, I'd always assumed or planned on that someday I would come back to racing. In fact, when we were building the house and putting the driveway in, I had already started the little part of the drive extending out to where later I had planned on putting a garage as a race shop, a little garage for the bike and a exercise facility, things like that there. So that was already started clear back then. So it was in my plans that later I would come back. So we're fast forward up here now to 1990. And I gotta say, I have very little photographs, hardly any. In fact, I couldn't find any at this point from that time period. I got to go back and look some. At that time, Davey Coombs was who has Racer X magazine. The magazine was never actually even started until '98, but prior to that, some of the years way prior to that, Davey had done, I believe he was probably still in high school or just out of there. He's always into journalism, things like that. Anyway, he used to write just a little paper thing he would take and pass out at the races and that, from stories on the races from the weeks before and that. Then that led on and he started, I think maybe his District 5 paper he was making, just a little racing paper. Later then it did become the Racing Paper, and then later into 98 he started the Racer X magazine. So anyway, what I was going with this here is I do have a tote in the one shed that's, I saved a lot of those from back then. So one of these days when I get some time, I'm going to go through the totes. Maybe I can find more information from this time period, but I have not a whole lot other than just memory to go off of as far as results, things like that. So again, I'm just pulling this from memory. So before I go on into the year of 1990, I had realized in some of my prior years, just thinking and trying to find information, I found a little more information that kind of jogged my memory in that for a few more stories. So anyway, 1990, at this point, Dave Clausen and Clay Marsteller, who I used to go a lot with, traveled with Dave all the time back in the earlier years, and then they were done racing. But one of the stories from back then is Clay owned this Bull Talka dealership. This had to be back in about 1979. So the one day, and let's just say the Bull Talkas were very prone to seizing up or blowing up, or the pistons would shatter in them, or they would do what you called seizing. The tolerance between the piston and the cylinder wasn't great enough, so when that piston would expand as it got hot, and then it would just stick, it would actually freeze and lock up right to the cylinder wall. It would lock the whole engine up. But then the bike could cool back down and it would start up and run again. I'm sure there was some damage. It would usually put scuff marks and that to the piston and stuff. But they would start up and run. So anyway, one day we're at the bike shop. It's just me and Dave was there. And don't know what it was. We needed something up at my parents' place. And they lived probably about 4 miles away. So we decide, there was a brand new Bull Talka street bike. I don't know what the maker model of it was or anything. We pull it off the showroom floor and decide we're going to ride it up to get whatever it is that we need. And so I'm riding and Dave's on the back behind me. I guess he's going to hold on to whatever it is that we're transporting. So like always back then, you're just full throttle anywhere. So we're out on the street pull the thing out, and we ride it up to my parents, get whatever, and on the way back, there's a straight stretch. It's probably a good maybe 3/4 of a mile long, and into a super fast left-hand corner at the end of this. So we come down through there, and this thing is just pinned on as fast, full throttle. From the beginning of that straightaway till the end, never backed out of it. It's just screaming down through there. We come into that left-hand corner, and there's two of us on the street bike. You're sort of starting to lay it over coming into this corner, and all at once you just start hearing this squealing noise, and it catches you off guard because it'd be like somebody slamming the brakes on, and you weren't aware it was going to happen because you're under full throttle. Here, what had happened, the engine had seized up, locked up, and it's the tire squealing on the road. And the bike then is starting, since the tire's just sliding, it's starting to slide out on me, going, just washing out to the right. And fortunately, I realized quick enough what had happened, grab the clutch, pull it in, and the bike sort of snaps back up straight, keep it under control. And for some dumb reason, I'm still not thinking quite of exactly of how this is happening, but I release the clutch and it locks up all over again and goes back into a slide. This time I get the clutch back in, we coast off to the side of the road. Sit there and thought, wow, that was a close one. So sit there for a little bit, let the bike cool down, and it starts up, takes off, and we ride it back to the bike shop, pull it back in and park it on the showroom floor. It's just kind of one of those stories from back at that point in time. I got another one from somewhere back in this time. Is one day me and Shirley is heading to a race down by Pittsburgh. I believe it was probably Rocky Ridge we were headed to that day. Pretty certain it was. And it was just the two of us, had the Chrysler LeBaron pulling a bike trailer behind it. We're heading down 79, and I know that Johnny Gallagher and his mom and dad, Johnny's at that point in time probably not 16, so his father's driving. They got their truck with an enclosed trailer behind it, and they're heading down there as well. So we're going to meet up down at Rocky Ridge. Well, anyway, on our way down, we get almost to, it would be, I believe it's marked as the Mount Nebo exit, just before the big bridge there that crosses the river. And the car quits on us. So I coast off to the side of the road, and it's sitting right at the top of this exit ramp that goes down there. And here what had happened is the alternator had quit charging, and we were just running on the battery, and the battery finally died, so the car quit. So we're parked on the side of the interstate there, go off to the side, and along come a few other people that also was headed to the races that recognized, they beeped the horn going by, must have thought we just pulled over for a little rest stop, so they don't stop. So there's just me and Shirley sitting there along the side of the interstate, and well, they figured there got to be something down at the bottom of this exit ramp there. And it's a little bit of a downhill. So she gets in and starts steering, and I start pushing the car to get it rolling, and then come running up, jump in the car, and we head down this exit ramp. It comes down there and hits like a T, and then nothing's coming. It's at a stop sign, but nothing's coming, so we keep right on rolling out the stop sign, turn left, because it's downhill, figuring there's got to be something down here. We get down to the bottom there of the hill, and it ends up, it just runs into a road that runs along the river there, and there's nothing around. So now we're down here, nothing around, stopped right at this intersection, coast off to the side, and we're trying to figure out how we could get this going so we can get on to the races. Well, along comes this car, and in it there was, I'm going to say there was probably 4 or 5 guys. They come up and they stop, and here these guys had been out the entire night from the evening before, been drinking. Every one of them was drunker than heck. So here we are down there, And kind of a dumb move on my part, not knowing these guys, but they seemed friendly enough and all. So Shirley's going to stay behind with the car, and they say they'll take me on somewhere to drop me off. So I get in the car with them, and we go. Well, it's obvious they've been drinking a lot. So we head on, and they weren't up to nothing. They truly were going to help. So we end up at somebody's house that they know, and they go up there and they get a set of jumper cables. And at first they're just going to give me the jumper cables, and I can hitchhike back or something, make my way back. But they're giving me this set of jumper cables so I can get back to get the car going. Then they decide, no, they'll give me a ride back. So we leave this guy's house with the jumper cables, the carload of them drunk. We head back, we get back to the car, and it all works out well. They pull over there, we get the car jump started and let it charge a little bit, and we head on to the races. So we do make it there to the racetrack, and that just goes straight there, keeping it running the whole time. And get there to the racetrack, and then at the end of the day, since Johnny Gallagher and his mom's there, it ends up that we get the car jump started again to leave the racetrack, and we run it back to Bob Schwartzmiller's parents' house. They live down there by the airport in that region. So we get the car back there, leave the car there, and then the five of us come back in Johnny's mom and dad's pickup from Rocky Ridge. So just another story that I had forgot to interject from back then. So I'll go on with another little story. There's several of them here that I had, and then I'll get on to the 1990 series. But so back in, up until about 1981, that's when the water-cooled bikes first come out. But prior to that, they were air-cooled. The air-cooled bikes they were not near as reliable as the water-cooled. In fact, the very first water-cooled bike that I ever remember, and this here was probably even it was the year prior to the water-cooleds coming out. We're at Harbor Woods one day, and Jeff Glass, he comes, which Jeff used to race there all the time. But he had got, it was called a Mugen, or Mugen, something like that. M-U-G-E-N, I think is. And Mugen is actually essentially it was Honda. I believe it was the guy who founded Honda. It was his son started this company, Mugen. Anyway, they were like a very small company as far as I know, but they produced a Mugen, somewhat Honda, and it was a water-cooled bike. Not sure how Jeff got one. They weren't even out into production yet, but anyway, he showed up there the one day. That's my first recollection ever of a water-cooled bike. But prior to that, bikes, you had them down all the time, the motors and that. They were just very unreliable. The air-cooled on my 125s, I would get maybe 2 weeks out of a top end before you had to rebuild them. And you had cases split and all that. So I had the workshop there at my parents' house, the back of the garage. That was sort of like my bike race shop. And it was a big hangout too, because right by the campground. So had a lot of friends from up there. So we used to play this parts game, just to give you an idea how much we had that motor apart. We would have the entire bike, could be stripped down, laying there on the bench. That motor would be cases split, all the parts out, top end, clutch, the whole entire motor split down into all the little pieces. Carburetor parts, there could be suspension parts and everything. I would leave the room, and one of those guys, somebody would go in and they could pick any part they wanted. Didn't matter what it was. It could be as small as that little push bearing for your clutch rod and that. Any part. They would take one of them parts and hide it. And I could go back in that room, look at the parts, and within a pretty short period of time tell you what part was missing. That's just an idea of how much we had that motor and bikes apart and that playing that little parts game. We used to do that every once in a while. But just another little story there. So I'll forward on now. So this here's going to be up to 1990, the beginning of the year. And I had always kept a bike. And by this point, I'd got rid of my 83. I'd picked up, it was a 1997 Yamaha 125. It was used for the GP they held at Steel City. And then eventually I ended up with that. That was my bike. Just kind of got it for trail riding and that. So later in that year, sometime, I don't know if it was mid-season or what, there's a new track opening up in Lyonsville. It's kind of a local track. Well, it is a local track. And I hear this track opening up, and I thought, hey, it would be kind of fun. I'll just take my 97 up. It's a little bit outdated because a lot of your earlier years, you had to almost have a brand new bike. Well, you did want a brand new one every single year. They would last you 1 year at best. And they would be totally clapped out. But anyway, I had this 97, so I take it up there to Lyonsville. This here's in 1990. And it was Art. I don't recall his last name. And they're still running up there yet today. But anyway, Art, he also had a radio station. It operated, and it was primarily out of his house across the road. But Art was starting this track up there. And at that time, it was just an outdoor track. He hadn't put up all the lighting and all that to do night races and that up there. So he got this outdoor track going, and they would get pretty good turnouts up there. So we go up there with this 97 and that, and right away I start winning again. And well, I got to say the large reason to that is because I've been off the bike now for a lot of years, quite a few years, and not even riding a whole lot. But basically Lyonsville, and somewhat even today, it's a local track. They just draw in the local guys from around here. It's not your near the competition you're going to get when you go to District 5 and AMA. And that was the riders that were there. But not so much realizing that the competition level wasn't so high. But so anyway, I'm having pretty good results there, winning, having fun, just racing and that. It's just this local track doing that there. And they are getting a few guys in there that are a little better, but still no real big names or competition there. So we're there, and towards the end of that year, I'm going to say it was more around fall time, somewhere. I think Stonebur Fair was possibly just starting that weekend. So, and I know they're always right at the end of summer. So we wake up that morning, and we're going to be going up there to Lyonsville, and I'm sitting there eating breakfast, and I hadn't had a crash in quite a while. And at this point in time, I think a little different than I did when I'm younger. And so anyway, I'm sitting there eating breakfast, and you kind of calculate your odds a little bit, knowing that the longer it's been between a hard crash, the odds are greater that you're going to have one. So I know going there that day, I felt just a little bit uneasy for whatever reason. And so we're there, and practice starts. Go out and practice. And there's like a long straightaway that comes down along, coming up to the finish line. I believe there was like maybe a set of doubles to doubles, and then it was into a left-hand corner right there where the checkered flag was. And maybe a couple small jumps right there to slow you down for scoring purposes. But it's just practice, and practice typically can be pretty wet because they water the track and that and let that run in throughout practice to help keep the dust down. And at the track, everybody follows, the main lines develop. And primarily, everybody runs the main lines. Well, I used to always, during practice, I would pick out areas in thinking ahead a little bit that you're going to need to come up with passing lines. So I would pick these out prior to. So during the race, you already know, okay, if somebody's here, here's where I'm going. And you try them out in practice a little bit, like pre-testing these lines, how well they work. So I'm coming into there, and everybody is running down, and since it's a little bit slick, they're going to the outside, hitting the berm to make this left-hander and sweeping that berm. And I decided I'm going to come down on the far right, sort of tuck, then turn prior to where I can tuck right across the inside, very inside of that corner, clipping across there and setting up a line that way. So that's my plan. I come down into there and I start to go in there, and it was just a little more slick than what I had anticipated on, and the front end washed out on me. Just sort of an easy slide out. It wasn't a hard crash at all. Just slid the front end out, and as I go down, just sort of slide out, go down, hit the ground, and immediately as you would, you go to jump right back up to grab the bike and get back on. I got up and I went right back to the ground and knew immediately I broke something. So it just happened. Shirley was standing there right at the corner there watching, and she's standing there talking to John Postolic. That was Gary Postolic's dad. So anyway, they're standing there talking, and they look over, and she said that she thought, well, she didn't think much of it at all, just and then realized, I'm back on the ground. And again, paramedics are always at the races. They get right over there. It's really quick. Somebody's there, but I know that my foot's broke. There's no doubt about it at all. So right away I'm thinking, get the boot off. I know there's going to be I've seen multiple broken bones in that over the years. I already know. Like, get the boot off. Don't, because they're a heavy leather boot. Get it off now, because the pain really hasn't set in yet. It's really just a numbness, but you do feel some pain. But get the boot off, and before the swelling hits you and the pain sets in, get that boot off there, because it's going to be difficult later. So get the boot off. As it ends up, I decide, like, okay, I don't want to have the ambulance bill for one. So my cousin there, Donnie Clark's there, and decide, okay, he'll just run me over to, so me, him, and Shirley leave in his pickup. They get me into the pickup, so the paramedics don't go along or nothing, no ambulance ride. I go in a pickup, and they're running me back to the closest facility there is Lakeland Emergency Center in Conneaut Lake. So we leave there, partway there, by now the pain is starting to really set in. And by the time we get over to Lakeland, get me in there, they do x-rays pretty quick. The doctor comes in from somewhere up in Meadville, Dr. Smart, comes in and evaluates it. Anyway, we end up leaving there. Bad story to go with that, but we end up leaving there and back out in a pickup. They take me out in a wheelchair, get me to the pickup, and at this point in time, the only pain medication I've even been given was maybe a couple Tylenol or something. So anyway, load back up in a pickup, head down to Greenville Hospital, get down there, and take me in right away. They take you right in. They're going to start prepping you for surgery and everything. And just a little story to go with that. The working nurse there that was giving me one of the shots, when I had the tree service, we had done work at her property. And I don't remember. There was a little bit of an incident there or something. And all I can say is, man, did that shot hurt. I don't know whether that was on purpose or not, but I do remember her being there. So anyway, at the hospital, they take me in, they call in, I believe it was Dr. Skellen was the one on call for the day. And since I had already eaten, they can't put you out for surgery. You're going to stay awake, but they drug you up enough that you really don't care what they're doing. And they give you a spinal, where essentially you're paralyzed from the chest down. You can't feel a thing. I remember that they take you into the operating room, and anyway, they had to redo my foot, pin it back together. It was a pretty severe break. I broke the whole half, the one end of it, pretty much in the center of your foot. I broke it clear in half, folded it backwards and broke that in half. So it had to be pinned back together and everything, and not sure why, or how, but I know it was a very bad break. But when he put it back on, he really didn't get it back on straight. And even to yet today, it has a complete offset in my foot, where the end of my foot is shifted off to the side. So I spend the next 3 days in the hospital. Don't remember a whole lot about that. They keep you pretty drugged up. I know I was about once every 3 hours. I think that's the most they would give you. They come in and they give you another shot of morphine, and they were doing it in your hip, and they would alternate from one side to the other. I do remember that was getting pretty sore. Anyway, spend 3 days in the hospital. Finally, they let me out to come home. And then I was stuck in bed with my leg hanging in basically a sling from the ceiling, where all you can do is pretty much lay on your back with your leg hanging in the air. So anyway, that was the broken foot error there. And so I'll go on to a little bit later on then from that there. This here's probably a good year later or so, maybe 2 years. I still couldn't run really too well on that foot. I mean, I was, but it was never right. So Johnny, a friend of mine there as well, Johnny Gallagher, Johnny had many broken bones. He had a lot of injuries. Broken lower leg, upper leg, knee surgeries, multiple times breaking his leg. And Johnny always went to a doctor called Dr. Steele, pretty well known orthopedic surgeon in Greenville. Always used him and was always happy with his results. So he kind of recommended, hey, why don't you go see Steele? And I thought, all right, I'll do this. But I'm already, in my mind, I'm thinking I'm going to go there. So I get my old x-rays and that, go to Steele, and take them in, and I'm expecting that he's going to say, hey, we're going to have to re-break your foot and reset it, put it back on straight because it's crooked. So that was what I was expecting he was going to want to do. And so I'm in there waiting for him to come back into the room, and he comes in, and he was pretty blunt with it. He says, sometimes the injuries are severe enough the doctor can only do so much with what was broken, and you're dealt with what you got. He said, seeing those x-rays and the foot and that, he said, you're going to develop a time. He said, you will probably never be able to run again. But I'd already been running some, just can't really run right. But anyway, he tells me that, and he tells me also that in your older years, when you get older, he said, in fact, you're probably going to see a day where you will no longer be able to walk on that foot. And I thought, well, for some reason, I just, in my mind, thought, I can overcome this. No, not a big deal. I mean, it was, but in a way, I just really didn't totally believe what he was telling me. So I start doing a lot of foot exercises, just where you would do toe rises and working and working and working that foot to get it back to where I could use it again. So anyway, that's the end of the 91 or the 90 year. Again, not many pictures in that. I put up this picture here. The one that you're seeing here is that is actually since I'm married now. On the right there, that is my mother and father-in-law, Joe and Merle Reinhardt. It's myself and Shirley in the center, and it would be my mother and father, Doris and Frank Spiegel, there on the right. This picture was taken a year or so later in 92. But since I had none from this era, and I thought now it's become a little more family oriented, a little bit, or will become, that I'd put this picture up. Because the racing's not over yet, really, even though I've just been through this with the broken foot. I will make it back. I will go on, and I've got a lot more pictures and a lot more for the later years. But I got one more to go with this because I'm going to 91, and since I'm have the broken foot at the end of 91, there's not a whole lot of racing until clear towards the end of 91. I'm back and do a very few races at the end of 91. So another little story to go along here. So it would have been the end of 91. And we go down to Beaver Valley. And just to back up a little bit on this here, same story, but in earlier years, this here would have been probably back in around 92, 93, me and Johnny were running the same class together. And at that time, I was pretty much winning, you know, most every weekend or when we were going to the races. And there was other friends around in that, and after the race, they'd come over, running over or whatever, you know, and just Johnny's mom was taking it kind of like she was always very protective of him. And so we're at Yankee Lake one day, and I don't know where Johnny finished out that day, but I'd got the win. We're all pitted together, and there's a bank there with a creek that runs down below. And I was unaware of it at all. All of us was. Never knew it, but she was just being protective, I guess. Or you could say she was one of the moto moms. Very nice lady. Always got along with her great. But for some reason, this day, that it just really ticked her off. So you could picture, here it is, you know, she's older in years at this point in time. She gets up, picks up this lounge chair, storms over to the end of the bank, throws it over the bank into the creek, and started going off a little bit about, like, she was just upset, you know, that I guess she felt I was always getting the attention, I was winning, and Johnny was being left out somehow. It was never intentional. There was never any hard feelings between me and Johnny at all. But that is a little story of his mother. So now we'll fast forward up. Here now we are, 1991. We're here at Beaver Valley at the end of this year racing. And here it is, me and Johnny's back in the same class. Johnny had continued on and been doing like some of the pro national stuff like that. He had continued on racing in that. So he had progressed quite a little bit, you know, over the years I was off. So here we are, Beaver Valley, both in the same class again. And I don't know if Johnny got the win, but he did finish ahead of me. And his mother comes over and just makes a comment about, I don't remember exact words, but how does it feel to lose something or get beat? So just kind of a unique story. Never any hard feelings at all among us. It was just one of those comments from his mom. And we always got along great. I mean, I had dinner over there at their places at time and everything. But just a little story of Johnny's mother. So that's about the end of what I got for the 1990-91 race year. And I'll pick up then it'll be preparation, which starts in 91 for the year to come for 92 and that. And can say in these years got a lot more photos, a lot more race results, things like that to go. But this here's sort of, you could call it my new beginnings or starting over again, was 90 and 91. Getting ready to come back racing in that, which will pick up for 1992 on the next one.